What's up going on, guys? It's Vinny Lospinuso here with a new video. I've been gone for a week, but I think in this particular time, with all sports coming back, I think we deserve to have a do-over and a real look at someone that I think many people have forgotten as a serious contender for the Hall of Fame. Now, as we all know, a big problem that many people have had with the Pro Football Hall of Fame is that there aren't enough receivers in. The bar for receiver is way too high. And a big reason why this is the case is because a lot of the voters are older, and back then they saw the running back as the premier position. They didn't see the wide receiver or any receiver as a position like we do now. So over the years, this is, of course, not only just people today, but this has also made some guys like Drew Pearson, Laverne Dilwig, or Jim Benton, Ken Kavanaugh, Del Schaffner, Harold Jackson, and a whole bunch of other guys that have just been ignored and forgotten about by the Pro Football Hall of Fame voting committee. And we might be even seeing that this year. Even though 2020 had three more receivers make it with Max Speedy, Harold Carmichael, and Isaac Bruce, there's still a long way to go. And not only that, you already have Calvin Johnson coming up. You also have Anquan Bolden. You have Andre Johnson. You have Steve Smith. And on the ballot already, you have Torrey Holt, Rod Smith, Chad Johnson, Hines Ward. It's ridiculous. It's honestly ridiculous that they still haven't addressed the wide receiver issue. I mean, yeah, they put in three, that's great, but you still need Drew Pearson, you still need Harold Jackson, you still need Torrey Holt, and you need a whole bunch of these other guys, and Laverne Dilwig, and like I said. Phenom says the original GOAT, Jerry Rice, has made it difficult for wide receivers to get in the Hall. Well, then they need to stop comparing every receiver to Jerry Rice. If that's the case, they need to stop to, because it's the same thing with anyone else. Stop thinking that every receiver is Jerry Rice, because that's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean you should just limit all receivers. Stuff like this is why there's also a very big division and divisiveness between the fans and the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Fame voting committee, because fans want more receivers. It doesn't matter if they're a Dilwig or a Pearson or a Holt. They just want to see more. And the fact there's only been a few that have been first ballots, that has raised some concern and honestly made a lot of people really furious. But even though I did mention Holt and Ward and Johnson and Smith, there is one person that I do think deserves to be in the same sentence as the rest of them. However, due to not being in the same market as the rest of them, due to being in the smallest market in terms of a fan base perspective and in terms of the NFL's perspective, his name has not really been mentioned as much as he should be. And I think there's an issue with that, and I want to correct that. And the name of that player is Jimmy Smith. Now, for those that don't know who Jimmy Smith is, he was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys early in the 90s, but his time with the Cowboys wasn't that well known. He was often injured, didn't play a lot, and was cut from the team. He played and then spent a time with the Eagles in the preseason, but he was also cut. But then in 1995, he had a tryout. Was it 1995? 1995, 1996, whatever. The mid-90s, he had a tryout with the expansion Jacksonville Jaguars. And he was accepted. And paired with Keenan McCardell, they had one of the best 1-2 combinations at wide receiver for the last 30 years. In fact, Smith is responsible in the Jaguars. The late 90s Jaguars were a really, really fun to watch team. They won the division a few times, and they even made to the AFC Championship game a couple times. Both times they lost, one to the Patriots, the other one to the Titans. But the fact they still made it there, despite being an expansion team just a few years prior, including just the year afterwards, is impressive. Now, you might be saying, is he really that good? I think he just might be very good. Maybe not truly great. You're wrong there. Jimmy Smith, numbers-wise and advanced analytics-wise, he's better than some of the guys already in. Because if you look at approximate value, over the last 5 seasons, his approximate value has been 74. The only ones that are better are Lance Allworth, who he's tied with, Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Michael Irvin, and Jerry Rice. The last best 5 seasons since 1960. This is not for anyone from 1920 to 1959. This is only from people from the last 60 years. Now, who's below him? Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Rod Smith, and Randy Moss. Rod Smith, I've seen some people mention in Hall conversations. Randy Moss is already in. Antonio Brown and Julio Jones are arguably, easily the top 2 best receivers of the 2010s. And Jimmy Smith had a higher AV than both of them. Now, actually, to take that back, he had the same AV. So that means, according to approximate value, Jimmy Smith was as good from 1997 to 2001 as Antonio Brown was from 2013, 2017, and Julio Jones from 2014 to 2018. Now you look at Antonio Brown, he had Ben Roethlisberger, a future Hall of Fame quarterback. Julio Jones, who did he have? Matt Ryan, another future Hall of Famer. Who did Jimmy Smith have? Mark Brunell. Mark Brunell's not making the Hall of Fame anytime soon, buddy. He's not. He's not making the Hall. That's no disrespect to Mark Brunell. But even in basic context, everyone would agree that Ben Roethlisberger and Matt Ryan are on a completely different playing field from Mark Brunell. And Jimmy Smith was able to have an approximate value just as good as both of them with an inferior quarterback. That tells you that during that 5-year stretch on approximate value, Smith was better than both of them. Now, am I going to say he's better than Brown and Jones? No. But understand that your quarterback has plays a big role into how you are as a player, especially if you're a receiver. And Smith was able to make the most of the opportunities given to him. Now you might be saying, well, I don't know about 5 years. That's a little bit too short. I want it a little bit bigger. Okay, what about 7 years? Because he's pretty good in that department too. His approximate value the last 7 years, from 1996 to 2002, was 96. The only ones that are better, Randy Moss, Lance Allworth, Michael Irvin, Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Jerry Rice. And the 3 below him all have 94s. Rod Smith, Torrey Holt, and Wes Welker. I mentioned Rod Smith before, but Torrey Holt was a finalist for the first time last year, and he's been a semifinalist the last several years. He was also a 7-time Pro Bowler and made it to the All-Decade team in the 2000s. Wes Welker, meanwhile, is another person that some people have been considered for the Hall and is known for changing the way we do offenses with the slot position. And again, Rod Smith had John Elway. Yes, end of his career, but still he had John Elway. Torrey Holt, again, earlier in his career, but he also had Kurt Warner early in his career, and later on he also had Mark Bulger. Wes Welker had Tom Brady. Jimmy Smith, again, Mark Brunell. Again, nothing against Mark Brunell, but again, these 3 guys had better quarterbacks to work with. But Jimmy Smith was able to do better, according to approximate value, during these 7 seasons. That tells you that he, again, made the most of this opportunity that was given to him. And if you really want to know about making the most of your opportunity, in 2001, he did something that no one has ever done before. In every single game in 2001, he caught 5 or more receptions every single game. In 2001, that has never been done before. Oh, thanks, Godfather Media. Thanks, Joe. That has never been done before. 2001. This is 2001. It's not like how it is in the 2010s where it's more pass happy. This is in the transition from the 90s to the 2000s. And the fact that he was able to do this in 2001 speaks to how impressive of a feat that was. Now, like for instance, Dan Marino threw for 5,000 yards in 1984, I think it was. You see them on occasion, for instance, Jameis Winston last year, but it's a lot more common. It's much more impressive back then when offenses were not as known for throwing the ball deep. Since then, Pierre Garçon, who will never make the Hall of Fame, and Antonio Brown, who might make the Hall of Fame, have since tied that. But again, they did that in the 2010s, where it was far more pass happy. Jimmy Smith was able to do this 15 years before them. He was able to do this 13, 15 years before them. I mean, you got to understand how important he was for that offense. Even though you had Keenan McCardell, they always relied on Jimmy Smith. And he was always able to be there to catch the ball. And not only that, speaking of 5 receptions, until Antonio Brown broke it, he had the most amount of consecutive games with 5 receptions with 21. Again, 10 years before Antonio Brown. And finally, how's it sound? Charlie Hennigan is a guy that I want to see make the Hall of Fame. He's one of the best players from the AFL, not in. I'm very high on him. I like former AFLers. But Charlie Hennigan had a record that stood for a very, very long time in 1961, when in a 10-game span, he had 1,319 receiving yards. But in 2000, Jimmy Smith did it again. He managed to break that record with 1,329. He was able to do it. Not Jerry Rice. Not Michael Irvin. Not Chris Carter. Not even Lance Allworth. It was Jimmy Smith that did this. Jimmy Smith was the one that broke that record. And yes, I'm not saying he's better than Jerry Rice or Lance Allworth. But Jimmy Smith was able to break Charlie Hennigan's record that went untouched. It came close, but it never was broken until he broke it 39 years later. That needs to be accounted for something. Yes, again, the offensive got bigger, but those other guys weren't able to do it. He was. And speaking of 2000, people like to talk about fantasy a lot. Well, according to Yahoo, he had the best game for fantasy ever by any receiver the last 20 years when he had 54.6 points in 2000. Again, I know it's fantasy, but when you have the best ever game from a fantasy perspective in history the last 20 years, and it's much more involved with fantasy football now, Terrell Owens didn't do that, Andre Johnson didn't do that, Amari Cooper hasn't done that, Will Fuller, a lot of these names on here. And Jimmy Smith was able to go way above everyone else. The closest Andre Johnson had was 45.4 points. Terrell Owens had it twice, 45.3 and 44.8. And Julio Jones, the highest he's ever had is 44.8. But Jimmy Smith has all of them beat with 54.6. 54.6. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive, I'd say. And yeah, you can say, oh, he has 2 first-team All-Pros and 5 Pro Bowls. You know, over the years, more and more people have been kind of iffy on both Pro Bowls and All-Pros. Not saying they aren't deserving. Those are obviously important statistics. Those are obviously important awards. But as more and more time has gone, we have begun to see other avenues as well as the All-Pros. And we look at stats. And the stats show the obvious that Jimmy Smith, approximate value-wise, record-wise, and also in terms of just being a great player, he deserves that. And now I know he's not going to be the first Jaguar to make the Hall of Fame. Tony Boselli is going to be that. He's been a finalist the last 4 years. He should make it this year, whether they have 4 moderns this year or 6. Fred Taylor, another Jaguars great, phenomenal runner. He made it as a semifinalist this year. I'm not sure he's going to make it next year, but he might. Who knows? But there's a third Jaguar right there. Again, Jimmy Smith is that easy third Jaguar. Tony Boselli, check. You got him soon. Is it going to be Fred Taylor or is it going to be Jimmy Smith? I can honestly see either one. I would go with Jimmy Smith. Nothing against Fred Taylor. But Jimmy Smith did more for receiving records than Fred Taylor did for running back records. And again, that's not a shot at Fred Taylor at all. 4.7 yards per carry is impressive. And similar to Jimmy Smith, he didn't have a lot of accolades because he played in Jacksonville. He wasn't really that seen. But fortunately now we have the statistics, we have the evidence to back it up, and it shows without a doubt. Even though you had the drug addiction afterwards, we shouldn't let that get to you. We shouldn't. There's been a lot of guys that have done a lot worse, and we can forgive someone. Drug addiction's a real thing. And we should not fault someone like Jimmy Smith who had a phenomenal career. We should not let that be the focus. We should not let that be the highlight of his life. The highlight of his life should be getting that gold jacket, bronze bust, and ring for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It might be difficult, but I really do think if people push hard enough, it actually can happen. Who's with me, everyone? Jimmy Smith for the Hall of Fame. I know it might sound a little crazy, but it's there. The numbers show it. I have the proof. I revealed it all. I hope you, Jimmy, if you're watching this, I salute you. Thank you so much for bringing this to my attention. I'm very, very happy you spoke out for yourself. Even though many may have a bit of an issue with others speaking out for themselves, if no one else is going to do it for you, might as well do it yourself. Isn't that how you even got in the Jaguars to begin with? It is. And why not let that be the reason why you make the Hall of Fame as well? You overcome a lot of odds to get where you are, Jimmy. You overcome drug addictions. You overcome broken legs. You've overcome getting cut several times. And while the Jaguars are certainly not the most popular team in the NFL, they were the perfect one for you. I love the admiration that this city has had for you. I love the admiration that this fan base has had for you. I love the admiration that everyone there has had for you. And I want that love of them to really go to you. I want that to be a part of you for the rest of your life. And I want that to be something that we all look at for the rest of our lives too. And that's that's my case. That's why I think Jimmy Smith deserves a spot in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm with you, Jimmy. Bless.